For those of you who are just starting to see and understand what's going on around you, it's a lot to take in. For the ones that have been watching all along and long before any of this even started, because this goes way back to the 90s, the 80s, even further back. But knowing your history and having a good perspective is very important. But for those of us who have been watching, it's just funny how all this stuff is starting to bubble up to the surface. All this stuff is coming out now.
The city-state of London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings, and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words "In God We Trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the President is the most powerful man on earth. the United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the President is President of the Corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.
Because, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know do you know who the good people versus the bad people are? I mean, we're told Putin bad, Ukraine good, everyone's flying Ukraine flags, but wait a second, there's a whole lot of stuff there that no one's talking about. I mean,
Ukraine, according to Wikipedia, is the 3rd most corrupt government on the planet. Yes. That's Wikipedia. They lead Europe in child sex trafficking, illegal organ harvesting, money laundering, which we know has been widely taken advantage of by politicians in the United States. Zelensky, the reincarnation of St. Peter. Yeah. Churchill, whatever. It's funny. I just want to address this. The liberals hate Churchill. I mean, if you read them, they want to expunge him from everything. But that was the default guy they went to when they needed someone to create a hero-like image. Churchill. I mean, Churchill had his problems, but, they want to call him the new Churchill. I think more likely they think he's St. Peter reincarnated. But, he just banned all political opposition. He just nationalized the news media. This is the guy we're supporting. I mean, Burisma, all those names. It's just a horribly corrupt country. And so we have to think of what we're doing. And I always ask the question, what would we do if Russia put bio labs? I'm going to call them bioweapons labs because they're dealing with things that could be weaponized. I mean, they admitted anthrax and all other pathogens were there. They were supposedly, making ways to defend against them. Yeah, right. Gain of function, in other words. And, what would we do if the Russians put those labs 20 miles south of the Rio Grande? I know what we do. In 1962, I remember my father leaving to go to, he was skip over destroyer at that time, and he was going down to Cuba because, a Russian had put nuclear weapons in Cuba, and we brought the world to the brink of nuclear disaster. Well, if in 2008, we became signatories to something called the Bucharest Declaration. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. Yep. Yeah, well, we promised that we would not absorb Eastern Bloc countries into NATO. Well, we started doing it almost immediately after that. Putin warned us at that time, right around 2008, that if we went into Georgia or Ukraine, it would be akin to a Cuban Missile Crisis. We knew it. Personally, I think we provoked it. For a reason. There could be so many financial reasons. It all boils down to money to begin with. What goes on. The corruption of Washington is beyond understanding. I just watched an interview with my friend John Lovell from Warrior Poet Society and Representative Hawthorne, a new congressperson. He's been in Congress for about 2 years, and they were talking about what he has seen in Congress since he's been there. I recommend watching the video. You can just go to John Lovell and type in, his interview with Representative Hawthorne, and he talks about he has seen senior level government officials doing cocaine, drug fueled orgies, where he was been asked, to come to these drug-fueled orgies. And it's all done for blackmail material, because this is what he said. The currency of Washington is secrets. Everybody has secrets on one another. We wonder why our new Supreme Court justice will be confirmed, even though she can't define what a woman is. She can't define what a baby is. Just think of how that implies. Doug, just segue for a minute here. I identify as a woman, and I go beat the living daylights out of another woman, a real woman. I identify as a woman. I can't be charged with crimes against the Domestic Violence Act, man against woman. I can't. I'm a woman. Do I get special government contracts because I identify as a woman? This is to demoralize and break down our society, which is they're being very functional at. They know what this is, because they have these acts. How do you have a Violence Against Women Act if you can't define what a woman is? It's you can't define it. So they know what they're doing. They are breaking down this civilization. These people are as debauched as they come. So, for the last 2 years, we followed a narrative that we yielded our rights, our children's rights, over to the government, fundamentally changed the way we relate to our government. They told us that we couldn't go to church. They left abortion clinics open. They told us who we could fellowship, how we could fellowship, what jobs we could have, what businesses could stay in business, what business could not stay in business, where we could go to a restaurant, all this. So it fundamentally changed the nature of government from we the people to we the government. The government yielded the power over people. And so they've established that. They're untouchable. They can do whatever they want at this point, dictate to us whatever they want, and they think we're going to have to obey them, because we did for the last 2 years. And now this war, which, I think Biden just blamed the burning of Rome and the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby on the Russians. Everything is the Russians' fault. And so the gas prices, Russians, the Russians kicked my dog. They ate my homework. Everything is Russia's fault. So what this is designing to do, they've already transformed the nature of how government relates to its people. And now they're creating the shortages necessary to make people dependent on them for everything, because this is what's going to happen. We have not seen inflation yet, because, Ukraine is not planting the wheat fields. And so we do not have the fertilizer. I have a chart, a graph that shows fertilizer prices in really a near vertical trajectory right now. So farmers are not going to plant corn. They're going to plant soybeans, which take far less fertilizer. And so we're going to see what goes in, what corn goes into, gasoline, everything corn's in. And so we're going to see a skyrocketing price of everything that corn does: beef, chicken, all of it. It's all feed, gasoline, all of it. And so this is going to create a dependent class in America. This is their plan. They're going to use Russia. They're going to use whatever. They'll start whatever wars. They don't care. They've murdered 60 million babies, so they obviously don't care what injury they cause to people. Nancy Pelosi standing in front of her Sub-Zero refrigerator eating gourmet ice cream, basically Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake or die. So that's what we're seeing going on right now. And we the people had better wake up to it, or we're going to wake up in the very, very near future with all of our rights gone. The supply chain completely broken, where you're going to have to depend on the government for everything. We see guaranteed basic income right around the corner. Last night I was listening to Marjorie Greene, representative, and she was talking about how at 12 o'clock last night, the Democrats called a quorum, and at 1:30 they met to pass the $1.5 trillion omnibus bill. They voted on it at 2:30. Not one Republican was aware of it. It's 2,741 pages. And they woke up this morning knowing that it passed, and nobody got to say anything about it. And so this is the type of leadership we have. So, everything they've lied about, Hillary's computer, Trump, his collusion with the Russians, the sicknesses, I'm not going to mention the word, all of it was absolutely lied about. What we're now supposed to believe this narrative on Ukraine. I'm just here to say, yes, what Putin is doing, the victimization of innocent civilians is horrible. It's terrible. But there's so much more at play that we do not know: who started it, why it was started, what was Putin pushed into. I tell you, as an intelligence analyst, I would say this: I've read Putin's speech. You'd like it or not like it. The speech reveals one thing: he's appealing to somebody, but censors would never let that emotionalism go by that he revealed in that speech. when you're interrogating somebody and they start telling you, I believe, I do this, and the emotion starts going in, that's the most exploitable thing you can do to somebody. As soon as they become a believer, you can exploit that. And there's so much emotionalism in that speech. I don't know if you read it, Doug, but this is a man who believes what he wrote in that speech. He is a believer in it. This is not something he wrote for public consumption. This is something he believes in. And so we're pushing him into a corner and not giving him any options. We've already declared him a war criminal, which means if he's captured, he'll go before the Hague. We're trying to financially destroy him, which is basically coming back on ourselves and destroying ourselves. Russia going to the gold standard, China buying their oil. We're creating an Axis and ally empire right now. My prediction here in the near future is that, the Biden administration is concocting a deal with the Iranians. They're going to make the Obama deal look conservative. The Saudis and the Israelis will be strange bedfellows, but they will have no option but to say we can't allow a nuclear Iran, and there's going to be war in the Middle East. So that's a two-front war right there. And when that happens, China's going to say, we're just going to march in. I mean, they basically marched into Hong Kong and nobody did anything. And now they're going to march into Taiwan. And if we do anything, that's a three-front war. We talk about catastrophic shortages now. If we stop buying from China, all of a sudden our inflation rate goes hundreds of percent because all the cheap stuff we get from China that fills all the big box stores everywhere, that is no longer available. So you see massive shortages, rationing. They've already talked about the digital currency. That would be the perfect implementation of digital currency so that they could control who buys what and how much you get. But this I think is a planned event. Let me say this as a Christian man. I love to read. I read the Screw Tape Letters. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Doug, by C.S. Lewis.
Yep.
It's a classic.
Yep.
And in that book, you have Uncle Wormwood telling his nephew Demon of how to deceive humanity, the subterfuge of words, trickery, all this. When they call it the Great Reset, I call it, how would Uncle Wormwood describe the Great Tribulation? He wouldn't call it the Great Tribulation. He'd call it the Great Reset. You'll own everything, own nothing and love everything. This is what we see being built right before our eyes. The Christian church is totally silent on this. They haven't grown a pair. As I was talking to you before the program, I have the 2-volume set, which I recommend everyone get. It's called Political Sermons of the Founding Era by Liberty Press. You can get it. And in that book, there's sermons by all the founding era of preachers preaching about how we need to be free from England and the moral impetus to do such. Even one of those sermons, I can imagine preaching this today before Congress. It's on Christmas Eve. One of the gentlemen preached a sermon on the second advent of Jesus Christ before both houses of Congress. Can you imagine that today? I mean, what do you think AOC's head would do? I mean, it'd explode. But this is what we've been robbed of. And if we don't take it back, if we go along with everything that they're doing, I look at the people who are supporting the Ukraine war, and they're my enemies. I mean, politically, they're my enemies. And so it has to cause question what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if we bought the same pill that we bought 2 years ago,